Hi, it's Juliet. Welcome to my studio. Hi, this is Juliet. Welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make these really cute hot air balloons for Beads of Courage. October is Beads of Courage month, and I'm very honored to be the featured artist for the second half of the month for the Arizona Society of Glass Bead Makers. They have a big contest going on to see who can make the most beads for Beads of Courage, and there's lots of fabulous prizes you can win as well. So stay tuned and I will explain the tools and the glass you need and then give you a demonstration on how to make a fun flying hot air balloon. So to make a hot air balloon, this is the first in the series of transportation tutorials that I'm putting together, and this is in the category of fly. And what's more fun than flying in hot air balloons? So some of the tools that you're going to need include some little mashers, and these are going to be used to shape the basket or the part where the people ride in the balloon. If you're going to apply Marini to them or some other techniques, you may find a pair of regular tweezers or a pair of tungsten tweezers handy. It's also useful to have something to press things down, either the magic wand. This is from Karina Beads. When we're shaping the balloon part, the round part, you may find it handy to use some sort of a shaper like this, and this one is also from Karina Beads. Or you can use a marble shaper to get that nice spherical round shape on the top. You can also just use gravity to shape it. In terms of glass, for making the hot air balloons, pretty much the sky's the limit. You can use anything you want. This is a great opportunity to use up leftover twisties or stringers or glass scraps. Good excuse to pull some new fun things. If you have Marini, you can use that. You can also apply Fritz. Pretty much anything will work with these. Make sure you have a little bit of clear to go in between. That's what I use to create the air gap, if you will, between the balloon and the basket. The clear there will make the bead structurally sound so you can get it off the mandrel. If you didn't have anything connecting it, there would be two beads, so that wouldn't work for Beads of Courage. Your imagination is the only limit here, so just kind of go to town. They'll all be different, and the kids are going to love them. Make sure if you're using a lighter like I am that you store it someplace safe away from flying hot glass because it can explode. Mine's in a drawer underneath my workbench. Okay, so for Beads of Courage, they prefer to use the larger mandrels because it's easier for the children to string the beads. However, that's not a hard rule. So if you only have smaller size mandrels, then go ahead and use those. I like to finger polish my mandrels, my dry mandrels, before I put them in the flame. That gets any hard grit out. It makes them smoother. And it makes it more optically clear as well. You don't have as much grit and grindy, bumps in the bead hole. It's more important if you're using a transparent. It also does make it a little bit easier to get the bead off the mandrel. Okay, so let's see what we're going to do. I think we'll make this one out of green, and we'll apply some twisties. So let's get started. I am using here for this example one of the Effetre, what do they call them, Opalino colors, or maybe it's an alabaster. It's number 516. It's one of the special glasses. So I'm going to start by winding on enough glass to make my hot air balloon part on top. And since this is going to be spherical, you decide what the size of it is and put down that width on the mandrel. And then it's just a matter of building up the glass. So just give me a second here to get the glass added. When working with the alabaster and opalina glasses, you want to work a little cooler because they can boil easily. But if you keep them cool, or a little cooler, it's like you would treat a Rubino or some of the other persnickety colors, you can help preserve that translucency and it won't go opaque or burn out on you. I will save this short here, let it cool off, and I will join it later. I like to join my glass together and use up every last inch. And then I will show you how I round it up and make it into a nice shape using one of the tools. If you don't have either a marble mold or some sort of a spherical brass shaper like I'll be using, you know, you can just use heat and gravity. Just takes a little bit longer is all. I just got this new tool recently from Karina Beads. I like it because it has the little notches for the mandrel, so it allows you to kind of get in that cavity and squish right to left as well, because the mandrel has a little bit of a place to go. So I find for shaping beads with a mandrel, it works better than a marble mold. It's actually made for beads, so go figure. Go to this size here, and I can rotate it at an angle and kind of get into those corners, or not the corners, the edges up along the mandrel and get it shaped up a little bit faster. So it's just a little bit more efficient. So with the Beads of Courage Challenge in October, there's all sorts of fun prizes you can win. There'll be a grand prize for the person that actually makes the most beads for the month. And there'll be prizes for each 2-week session for the people that make the most beads. And I believe there's also a couple of random drawing prizes as well. So be sure to check out the Arizona Society of Glass Bead Makers page. There's information about it. There's a group on Facebook as well that ASGB has set up for this event. Okay, so we've got the balloon part set, and the next step is going to be to decorate it. So I'm going to take my twisty and I'm going to wrap it around it, and I think I may demonstrate a little bit of raking with this. So I'm going to start at the top. I am below the flame and a little bit to the right, so that I am not super melting my twisty. It's kind of in the heat. I'm just glancing on the edge of the flame to soften it and to help me apply it to my bead. All right, now I want to melt that in a bit. And as it melts in, you can also use your tool to help kind of push it down and flatten it out. I want it to widen a little bit so it covers a little bit more of the base bead. But, you know, the decoration is totally up to you. You can go with any kind of colors. You can do stripes, you can do dots, you can do twisties, you can take Marini and use that. You know, there's just really anything you could do on a bead. Just use it as a great opportunity to practice new techniques and experiment. And I'm trying not to overheat my bead too much because I want to preserve that translucent color of the base glass. Okay, that's just about melted in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rake from the top to the bottom, and then I'm going to go over a little bit and rake from the bottom to the top. And that will make those, you know, vertical lines like you sometimes see in balloons, like the different panels that are attached or sewn together, or however they attach them for hot air balloons. So I want to let it firm up a little bit so I'm not pulling too much of the core. And then what I'm going to do is heat a segment from mandrel to mandrel, and then I will rake in the downward direction first. So I'm rotating my mandrel to aim all angles directly into the flame. And then I'm going to slowly rake a little bit at a time and pull it down. So there's the first one going downwards. Now I'm going to go a little bit over and heat it, and I'm going to rake in the upwards direction. If you rake them all down, you tend to pull more glass to the bottom, and you have more balancing to do later. And it also changes the look. This will give it more of a, you know, a serrated or a V shape, alternating up and down. So now I've rotated the bead a little bit more. I'm heating up the next segment, and I'm going to rake that in the downwards direction. And I'm going to rotate again. And what I'm doing now is I'm judging how do I have room to fit 2 more rakes because I want to end up, you know, with an even number. So I have an even number of up, down is up, down. So I'm just trying to judge to see how many I need to kind of scooch in to make it balanced. So that last one was down. So this one is going to be in the upwards direction. When I rake, I tend to pull a little bit, then pull a little bit, then pull a little bit. I don't generally have good luck grabbing a whole bunch and raking it all down at once. I tend to do the little incremental piecemeal raking. I find it gives you a little bit better control. You don't need to have the bead quite as hot. You know, sometimes I go in and I heat up again to rake the next segment if it cooled off a bit like that. So I have a down here and a down here. So I think I've got enough room to fit in one up. I'm not going to try to fit in 3 in there. So let me heat this section and I'll do the last one will be up. For me, since I'm right-handed, raking in the upwards direction, and by up I mean the left side of the bead because it's going to be standing vertically. I'm going to put the basket in the lower part of the balloon on the right. But for me, it's a little bit more difficult to kind of rake in that direction just because of geometry. Okay, so now I want to melt this in and get those little edges where I raked. You can see where they're sticking out a little bit. I'm going to heat those up, and I'm going to use my bead shaper to kind of nudge them back into place. I'm not going to try to smooth out the little raking indentations of it because I think that makes a nice detail on the bead. I'm just worrying about getting the edges so that the ends by the mandrel are nice and those are a little bit smoother. Okay, so there we go. Now the next step is to take some clear, and what we're going to do is build up a tiny barrel right up against the mandrel in here, and that'll sort of be our air gap where the people are, where they're looking out. And that sort of gives the illusion of, you know, space and connection in there. And it gives you some structural strength to hold the basket and the balloon together. So I want to have my mandrel hot and the edge of my glass bead hot because this needs to be a good hot join. If you use a thinner rod, you tend to have a little bit easier time getting in there. You know, you could use commercial stringer. This is just a thinner, probably about 4 or 5 millimeter as opposed to the more typical 7, 8 millimeter glass rod. And I build it up. It's not going to be as wide as the balloon part. So it's probably like half the diameter of the balloon part. So I got my first round up against the green of the balloon, and now I am heating it so that I can marver it into basically a cylinder. And you'll see I'm using my magic wand and I'm marvering on that back side of it that doesn't have that little ridge. So it gives me a nice cleaner edge. It gives me good control. I'm not too far from my flame. You know, I can heat it and I can go straight to my tool and just marver that little bit. And don't worry about if it goes down further than you think it needs to be because we're going to be putting the basket on in a second. And I think I will use, let's pick up some of the yellow that's in that twisty there. I'm going to use the yellow glass rod here. So now what I'm going to do is basically build up like another bead attached to the clear, and it's going to eventually be a little bit larger diameter from that. I'm going to start right on the mandrel just like I did before, and I'm going to build it up and go just a little bit on top of the clear as well. I want to make sure it's hot where I'm putting it on so we have a good join. And I'm kind of squishing it in and filling that gap. I don't want to be making an air gap against the mandrel there because then you get, when you're cleaning out the bead release later, you can have a little cavity there and it's a little more of a pain to clean. So if you have it good and hot and you kind of push it inwards, you can fill that whole area there nicely. So now I'm going to basically build it up like I would be winding a donut bead in this location and add some additional glass. Next step after this is going to be to turn it into a squarish basket shape. All right, so I think that's about enough heat. enough glass, and you can see I'm adding some heat to the balloon. Well, I'm letting that firm up just a little bit. We don't want it completely soupy when we go on to the next step. It's actually easier if just the outer couple of millimeters, the part that sticks out wider than the clear, is movable on the basket. Rather than having the whole thing, it's just easier to control it and shape it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat it up enough, just that outer bit, and then I'm going to mash it in one direction and then rotate it 90 degrees and mash it in the other direction. And it's important when you do that you look at it from the end so you get it to be a square. It's easy to end up with like a little diamond shape on the end. Although if you do, that's not really a problem. Just a different shaped basket. So I'm going to do my first squish here. I'm rotating it, and I'm going to do my next squish. And I'm going to look at it from the end. You can see I got a bit of a diamond shape there, so I'm going to heat it up a little bit and just kind of scooch that over a little bit and straighten it out. You have to get a little bit more heat. There we go. It's a little more squarish now. Clean up a bit of those edges there. So for this challenge called Fly, there are a couple of requirements. So the first thing is you need a form of propulsion. And so in the case of the hot air balloon, the balloon is actually what's lifting you. So that is a propulsion. You need a place for the people or the pilots to go. And in the case of the hot air balloon, this would be the basket. That's where the people go. And then the third thing you need is anything that you want it to be. It could be a decoration. You could put little people in here. You could, I mean, the sky's the limit. So at this point, since we have the decoration on the balloon and we have the place for the people to go, we are good to go. However, this is a Beads of Courage bead, and we got to add a heart to it. So, you know those little pouches that they have hanging off the side of the baskets? Well, we're going to make one on either side of this, and they're going to be little hearts. So I'll show you how to do that, because the kids need extra love. So I turned on my flame a little bit, and I took a stringer, and this is a red color. I'm going to put 2 dots side by side. On one side, I'm going to melt that a little bit so that they start to flow together and melt in a bit. And then I'm going to go to the other side. I want it to be a little bit warm when I put the dots on so that it has a good join. Warm it up over here. Let those melt in a little bit. I'm going to go back to the first side and heat that up a bit. And at this point, sometimes you might find it handy to use like a dental tool or something to flatten them out and make sure that they join in the middle, because those are going to be the 2 lobes of the heart. While I've got this tool in my hand, I will do the other side as well. Let me turn my flame back up a little bit now. Put a bit extra heat in my balloon. A little bit of heat for our heart lobes. Touch that one, touch the other one. Okay, now I'm going to get my tool that I'm going to use for raking again. And so for this first one, I'm going to heat it in here, and then I'm going to grab the center between the lobes and drag it down to make the heart. You don't want to drag down too much glass, because then you end up with a big blob at the end. I'm going to go kind of from the middle and then pull that down. So there's the heart on one side, and let's do the same thing on the other side. And pull it down into a heart. At this point, if it was a little hot, you may have distorted that, the basket a bit, so you can straighten that out. If you want to get fancy, you can, put those little strings, like make a little decorative loop on this side. Whoop, like that, and one on the other side, whoop, like that. Melt those in a little bit. For Beads of Courage, you want to make sure that you're not using any metallics. That could be silver glasses or reduction frits on the outside, because those aren't safe for the children to be touching. So make sure you avoid reduction glass and metallics on the exterior. It's okay if they're fully encased, but nothing on the exterior. And of course, you need to make sure there's no sharp edges and that you fully clean the bead release out before you send them into Beads of Courage. But there we go. We have a cute little hot air balloon with a heart on either side. Okay, so the next step is we're going to apply a couple of Marini. And I have the Marini prepared. It's going to be some simple Marini. What I have off to the right is a hot plate. And on that I have a copper piece on the top. And it's attached to one of those hair warming huts. Oops, just dropped it. And it brings the temperature of the Marini up to about 700 or 800 degrees, so they don't crack in the flame. Okay, so I took that out with my tungsten tweezers. I had a spot on my balloon hot. And now what I'm doing is I'm heating in a circle around the Marini, and then I'm going to use my brass tool to press it down. And I am trying to press it straight down so as not to distort the bullseye shape. You're better off heating a little, pressing a little, heating a little, pressing a little. Once you have it widened out, this tool is great for pressing. This is a tip I learned from Karina, because it's going to press it into a circle. And you see how nicely that widened it out evenly? I just love this for Marina. Okay, so there's one bullseye. I think I'm going to put 3 on this. So let me get another one. It's toasty over there. Okay, so I'm switching hands. And for this, I'm going to be using some frit. This is Sweet 16 frit from Valcox. And it has a blend of pinks and purples and a little touch of green. So I'm going to heat my bead enough so that the frit will stick to it. And I have a bit of the frit in a stainless steel oriental soup spoon. And I find that handy. You've got the little handle so you can pick it up and orient it to get all the different parts of the bead covered in your frit. So the next step is to melt that in, and then I'm going to use a tool. In this case, I'm using a piece of glass, a stringer that I've pulled. And you may have noticed I just created a little landing pad on the end of the stringer. What that allows you to do is have a broader footprint on which to swirl the frit, and it helps draw it in a little bit better. So if you want a tiny little swirl, then you could use a pointy stringer. If you want a wider swirl, you can use a little flattened part of a stringer. You could use a commercial stringer, or even a rod. But I kind of like doing it this way. Okay, so the frit is melted in, so it's smooth on the surface. Now I'm going to pick a spot where I want to do a swirl. And I'm going to heat up, this amount on it. And I want just the upper millimeter or 2 of the surface to be hot. And I'm going out to a wide area. That way when I touch down and twist, it will draw the glass in from that wide area. If I only heated a pinpoint, it would only have a really small swirl. So at the end of that, it was kind of fast. I couldn't talk as fast as I did it. I melted off the tool, and then I reheated it, and just on the tip of my torch, I made a new little landing spot. So I'm going to go to the opposite side of the bead. While that one swirl in the back is cooling off, I will warm up a spot, and I'm warming up a wide spot so I have a big swirl that draws in, and touch down and twist. Melt it off. You could also break it off, but I don't mind having a little white dot in the middle.
Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you guys enjoy these cute hot air balloon beads as much as we do. Don't forget to check out the rest of the Beads of Courage tutorials on the channel. Thanks!